But after 20 minutes, we looked absolutely fucked. Like the tanks were empty because of the intensity that we started with. And then you add on that, you're blitzing, you're getting up and watch the boys doing shuttles, mindless shuttles, blitzing up when they don't need to. And that saps the life out of you. And Australia came back into it. You know, Joseph Suaalii was ridiculous. They're offloading it. Angus Bell, best loose head in the world right now, Angus Bell.
Unbelievable.
Mate.
Who did he sit down?
He sat down a load of them.
Was it not Tom Curry?
He sat down Tom Curry.
Tom Curry.
Yeah, he sat down Tom Curry. Well done, Rob. He sat down Tom Curry. I saw him sit down Jamie George. And we might come on to him in a bit. Like they were on the front foot, well coached, well organised. Their offloading game, the skill sets that, to be fair to Joe Schmidt, he's been talking about it a lot. It came to fruition, and they picked off our blitz. Tate McDermott came on for 15 minutes in the first half and changed the game for them, attacking, sniping around the edges and making little darts there. England looked flat, looked knackered 20 minutes into the test, and for the next sort of 20 minutes of that first half, and Australia come back and they're in the lead at half time, and rightfully so. And Steve, I listened to him after the game, and he said, we drifted away from the game plan in that second 20 minutes. Players didn't run lines that they trained. So he stuck it all on the players. And I'm like, hang on, Steve, you've got to take some responsibility here. But it was a belting test match. There's loads of talking points around, you know, big instances in the game that I'll get into in a second. But you're right, Jim, like flabbergasted how you can start that well, 15-3 up, and then, you know, take your foot off the gas or empty the tank, and the Aussies came back, and the Aussies were damn good.
Remember I said on social media during the championship, and I took a load of people giving me stick, and I think you might have even said something, and I said, I've seen enough in the Australia team now to know that they're decent again, around the physicality and around their breakdown.
Yeah.
So watching them in the championship, you could see an identity coming. You could see it was hard work. You could see the way that they were trying to play. They were operating at 110%, which Joe Smith teams do, and the level of detail and the kind of inches and millimetres they were speaking about on commentary. We know that that's true with a Joe Smith team.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be a difficult environment to be in, but not as difficult as an Eddie Jones environment. So they've maybe got it a lot easier now. But you think about the changes that Australia have had. They lost one of their best players in Martin Wanganita-Wase. How good would he be with the new kind of law iterations as well?
Yeah, with the kick,
the high ball, and the kicks and stuff like that. So they've lost him. They've lost Jordan Pataya as well to the NRL. And from the outside, people are saying Australia rugby, it's on its arse, not even on its knees. I watched them during the championship, and they were hustling, they were competing, and the scorelines didn't reflect the game, whatever that means. The Scotland-South Africa result. But I saw enough in that championship to think that they could worry some teams, more so Wales. Did I think they would worry England? Not really. But when you look that England have lost 6 out of 8, then and they've beaten them, then maybe I've kind of cast an easy eye over them. But it was 15-3, thinking, right, it's going to be a foregone conclusion. But you've mentioned Angus Bell. Like, we will talk about Saili, who was absolutely world-class on his first game of rugby union ever. How fun is this? I was saying to my mate, I was like, you do realise that Joseph Saili's first game of rugby union, he's like, no, he's played rugby union before when he was at school. I was like, well, I played fucking tennis at school. That doesn't mean I'm a tennis player.
Straight to Wimbledon.
Exactly. Straight to Wimbledon. Exactly that. So the way that he played was world class, and to get him into union is massive. But mention Angus Bell, Nick Frost in the second row, old school as you like. The way that he carried his physicality around the breakdown was phenomenal. We've spoken about Fraser McWright at 7 before. He's got a little bit of Michael Hooper about him to stereotype, but he's a grafter.
He was great.
He was amazing. Henry Wilson, the old skipperoo as well.
He looks like he loves a night out, doesn't he?
But he does. He just looks like a normal working class guy. And I'm not one to stereotype them as kind of athletes, but these lads can play. And then we're talking about Saili, we can talk about him, but Ikatau in the centre as well. Yeah, he was unreal. But I actually thought that Tom Wright at 15 was amazing as well. And actually, these players that we might not be rolling off the tongue, apart from James Slipper.
Rob Valentini was ridiculous as well, wasn't he? You talk about athletes. You talk about athletes. There's an athlete.
Harry Wilson as
and
well.
That's where I woke up shocked a little bit on Monday, but just with how well that they played, but also like glad, because we know what's around the corner. We know how important Australia rugby is, but actually the shit they've been through with losing players, the coaching setups that they've had that has changed, the participation numbers, losing players to the NRL. I just thought, fucking fair fucks to you. Yeah. That's what I thought. I thought fair play, because it's not an easy place to go and play.
No.
And to be 15 points to 3 down and play the way that they did right until the very end, and the physicality that they showed and the attacking intent, I thought they were great.
So there's loads of question marks about this blitz team.
Yep.
Jim mentioned it there. What have we done wrong here?
Well, we're blitzing on every scenario. Every time we can. Every time the opposition got the ball, we're blitzing, no matter what's in front of you. Now, blitz defence is very good at the right times. And Henry Slade got caught. The try they score at the end, no way in the world should we be blitzing there. We're tight in D. Henry Slade's come right in. I'm not just pinpointing him, but it happened as well for Tom Wright's try in the first half. We blitzed so far in. There's times you can blitz, and there's times you got to hold your feet, and you have to have a balance to it. Like the Springboks blitz, but they don't blitz relentlessly, coming in 15 yards narrower than your starting point every time. That's what England were doing, and sometimes you go up hard and straight. But we are flying in from the edges, and we didn't learn from last week where New Zealand exposed us that way as well. But the skill level of the Aussies, and you saw Suaaliti's offload that leads to Tom Wright's try was ridiculous. Then you see Ikitau's offload. When you're 2 points up with the last play of the game, you don't fly off the line and blitz in like Henry Slade did. And there's a number of issues with it. One of the things I said, we had supposedly one of the best coaches in that area of the game in Felix Jones under Steve's stewardship. He said that he's handing his notice because it's an unstable working environment. We've now got Joel Alabdin as Steve's best mate, best man and coach. And you look across the coaching team, and I've said it before, I'm not saying this reactively now because we've lost to New Zealand and we've lost to Australia back to back. We haven't got a lot of coaching experience in that coaching team for England, right? And ultimately, people are pointing the finger at the defence. There's a load of issues with our game at the weekend. A load of really good stuff, but a load of issues. And a lot of it has to sit at Steve Borthwick's door. So obviously the defence and why you do it. Why aren't we having a sort of managed defensive system where sometimes you blitz, sometimes you're up and out, sometimes you're up and up. And you've got to understand that just flying in like headless chickens, because that's your system, you can't do it. And successful teams, don't do it 24/7, which is what England did. And it led to tries, and it led to massive line breaks. You go to the one in the second half where Australia should have had back-to-back tries within a minute of each other. They score a try, the one in the corner. Jamie Williams scores the try in the corner, which, could have been foot in touch, but it was actually the right decision the way the referee worded it, saying on-field try. But it was very touch and go whether it was in touch. I'm not going to moan about that. You then go down the other end, England kick off long, Australia get the ball, and we've got Chandler Cunningham South, Mara Itoje, Jamie George blitzing in. They've got about 40 metres of width between them, and they're blitzing. They just get picked off real easy by one pass from Ikitau to Wright, and then Wright nearly goes the length. And they should have gone and scored at the other end straight away as well. And that's down to our understanding of when you blitz, when you don't. England should have said at times, there you go. You want to kick it out, because Australia's kicking game isn't a strength of theirs, is it? In terms of they haven't got a guy that can hoof it miles upfield. It's then contestable, and you've got to back yourself in that if they just go into the box kicks. But by blitzing and offering them the opportunities to have some of the dangerous runs that they've got, and we spoke about it before the game. Tom Wright, Agabazee in the Rugby Championship at times, ridiculous. Ikitau, unbelievable. Lola Seo running things from 10. Suaaliti, absolute freak of nature. They have got Kellaway had a good game as well, I thought. We played into their hands by giving them the opportunity. You don't need to blitz there. So there's got to come from the coaching team of educating the boys. It's not just 100% blitz 100% of the time. Like there has to be.
And that was my point, Andrew, on the quality of opposition they've played in the championship. So they're up against the South African blitz. We know how the All Blacks defend as well with a kind of similar mentality. And I think with England, yes, they adopted it under Felix Jones. At times it has worked for them, but I think that's a really interesting point around how Australia play. They're now used to facing that, and the style of play where they're dangerous. Joseph Suai-Li'i, I said it right again, and Ikitau, and you said it there, and then right on that 15, their go-to is to actually to get to that edge, and we saw Suai-Li'i's offloading to be able to do that. Yeah. So they aren't going to kick, whereas what South Africa do if they're, say, the perfect version of that blitz, they are so physical in that space. They're stopping teams dead. Yeah. And then they've got the counter, and then they're forcing teams to kick. So they're actually getting them. And it was different against Scotland. You actually saw that Scotland managed to find that edge through the kick pass at the weekend. But England have adopted this because of Felix Jones, and who knows how it would have went with him still in that position. But like you said, and you saw at the weekend, they looked out on their feet. And they got done last week against the All Blacks as well, and in and around the kind of return plays. And I don't know all that inside out, right? You and Biggs were talking about it, so I'm picking that up, and then I'm looking at the game at the weekend. But you know that your defensive system isn't working, and this is with all due respect to Australia, that you're getting 42 points put on you by a team that are massively in transition, away from home, lacking in confidence, regardless of the quality. Yeah. So that's and Joe Alab, how much time do you have to come in? So there's clearly an issue, and with Steve and the makeup of his team, the fact that you're going into an Autumn Nation series and you've got changes of performance director, you've got your changes of your defence coaches. It's not a healthy position to be in, and to lose 2 on the spin. Are they 6 from 8 in losses? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. Yeah. So, and that's what I asked. I said, is his honeymoon period over? Like, I didn't know whether he still had that grace, but. Well,
it's question. It's question now. And I want to go hard enough, but I don't want to go so hard. But because there were positive signs from England at times. You know, the big thing, and I'll say it now, the crowd's reaction. George Ford gets his kit off, not literally, but gets his tracksuit off, and he stood on the side of the pitch, right? And this is how I think Steve's out of touch a little bit with the game. And what he goes on his stats, and, you know, A plus B equals C, but sometimes it doesn't. So, you know, he's bringing George Ford on 65 minutes and the whole crowd's booing. And that's a sign of, like, everyone's been talking about, you've got to leave Marcus Smith on at 10. At this point, we're chasing the game a bit, right? We're not chasing the game, we're 5 points down. And Marcus Smith at 10 has been, and he didn't have a worldie of a game, but he creates 2 or 3 tries. And then you move him to fullback and you bring George Ford on. And I'm like, I'm sorry, George Ford's time's up as an England player, I think. I don't think he should be in the squad. He hasn't played enough rugby this year to earn the right. Finn Smith at Northampton has played exceptionally well. George Ford comes on, and you base in, like last week, you base in on bringing George Ford on to close out the game. And this is a Steve issue and a George Ford issue. So, you know, last week we don't close out the game, and, you know, Steve's still talking about, you know, we're a pulse width away from beating New Zealand. Shouldn't have been in that position. This week, with 5 minutes to go, we've got ourselves into a position, because Don Brandt chucked that ball across and Slightham scores in the corner. You know, we are 2 points up. We're winning 30 points to 28, right? 5 minutes to go. We've got a line out just around the halfway line. Right, and George Ford is now at 10, Marcus Smith's at fullback. So George Ford is calling the shots. And they've gone to a 3-pass play off a driving line out, right, which Kellaway ends up intercepting. Now, I've looked at the play loads, and George Ford gets the ball out the back. He throws the ball behind Ollie Lawrence. And if you look defensively, Suai-Li'i has stepped so far in, the ball, if you're going to play this play, the ball is to Slightham out the back, and we're 3v1 around the edge. But when you're talking about game management, you're talking about experience, and you're talking about 75 minutes into the game, you're 2 points up, you've got a line out in and around the halfway line. And you talked all week about converting winning positions into a victory. That's an awful play to call at that point by George Ford. You know, you have got 5 minutes to go, and, you know, you're 30-28 up.
Kicks the ball.
You drive it, you box kick, Yeah, you box kick and you say to Australia, they are. Best case scenario is you've caught the ball in your 22 with a mark because the kit's too long or something, play out from there. And then you back yourself to defend.
Maybe the lads were saying Goode,
around the 22.
They were begging him not to do that because they didn't want to blitz again. They were like, I'm begging you. My calves are screaming 40, please.
But that's the thing. Yeah. But that's the thing. So, the whole structure and at times in attack, you look at the try that Slightholme scores, and I watched this from a fly half's perspective. George Ford is on that short side where Don Brandt gets the ball and eventually chucks it across to Slightholme to score in the corner. Watch what George Ford does. He runs to the other side. He runs off to the other side of the pitch and he's fly half. So I don't think they're coached well enough by this coaching group. And I don't, like Steve said after the game around, the players didn't run the lines that they're trained and they've gone away from the game plan. Like, I think that's got to sit with the coaches. You've not drummed it hard enough into them, or that's an excuse, or you've got players that play very well at club level, and Jim's point might be very relevant. Are we thinking the Prem is way better than it actually is? Well, these players, at times, after the 20 minutes, there wasn't a great deal of structure to England's attack. That's what I can't understand. You've had so much time together, and structurally, the attack, there was a lot of one-out runners, and I don't know whether it's because they're absolutely fucked and they're because of the blitz, and that's the knock-on effect. And I said it the other week, didn't I, around the knock-on effect of having to blitz all the time. If you're not physically prepped in that way, or if you're not South Africa where you're winning all the collisions, it's bloody hard. So then the knock-on effect into your attack is pretty bad as well. But we relied on bits of magic from Marcus Smith to score us tries, and then obviously the seed from Don Brandt towards the end. But our attack doesn't look well organised. And that's got to sit with the coaches. And Steve's decision to bring George Ford on sits with the coaches. I don't get it. And I'm not calling for Steve's head. I'm not saying he should be sacked or anything like that. If we lose to South Africa by a decent score and then we lose to Japan to Eddie Jones, then you've got to sack Steve. But at the minute, there's a lot of positive shoots around how we are playing, but it could be so much better. And I think, and I said it before, he needs an experienced coach around him to help him. And that's an RFU issue as much as it's Steve Borthwick perhaps not wanting that as an issue as well.
Do you reckon Jamie George's captaincy is in question then? I saw a lot of this online.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why the questions are there. And my issue is always taking your captain off after 50 minutes. And I know South Africa have done it with Sia Khaleesi, and it's different because you've got a bucket load of experience in Evan Etzebeth and Peter Steph-Toy and other guys like that take over naturally that position. And like Razzie said, the difference between 1 and 2 is very small in that South Africa squad. So it's always something I question when your captain comes off after 50 minutes. I think the first thing to say around Jamie George, at the weekend he was poor. Apart from the offload that he gets away for the first try, you watch the amount of tackles he's fallen off. Where's his carries? And he'll be the first one to analyse his own performance within that England framework and that team. And I don't know whether he looked knackered as well, off the back of the New Zealand game last week, and maybe they've overtrained this week. I don't know, but that was a collective across the field. You need to have a viable option to captain the team, and we spoke about last week with Marrow perhaps, but then a lot of other people have said Marrow isn't leadership material. He is sometimes from a performance perspective, but not in that talking and holding a group together perspective, which Jamie is obviously very good at. So like for example, I'm sat there going, we've named 4 vice captains, and right now your vice captains are Ben Earl, George Ford on the bench. Why have you got a vice captain named on the bench? I've got no idea. How does that make Marcus Smith feel? Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think Jamie George is the right leader within the group, although he did say that it's the easiest group he's ever had to captain, which I'm not sure. I don't know whether that's the right thing when you want to play 8-1-2 lost 6 record, because you've got to have more leaders within that to try and flip it around. But again, it's an exciting squad that isn't getting the results at the minute. I think losing Curry early in the first half made a massive difference as well. And maybe, Steve having Don Brandt and Nick Ezekwe on the bench, Ben Earl moves to 7, but still is trying to play 8 a little bit. and maybe there was a bit of confusion around whose roles were what. And Benno, you just got to go and be a 7 now and be a fetcher as much as being that ball carrier. And we just got lost a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, Jamie, I thought it was disappointing at the weekend as a player, and ultimately when your skipper's coming off after 50 minutes, it does ask those questions. But if not him, then who? And you're probably looking at Ellis Genge, Maro Itoje, and for different reasons, that doesn't sit right at the minute, probably.
I think why England fans appear to be most frustrated is like this narrative of kind of progress that they're always saying, and they don't seem to appear to own up to the failures. You look at what Razzie and Sia said after the win in Scotland. They said that what they saw on the pitch had made them nervous and that they weren't very proud of the performance. Whereas the noises out the England camp are always, we're getting better and things like that.
And I respect Steve. He was the one that wanted me to come to Sarries, so I owe him a lot for that as well. But I've always questioned whether or not he is the right front man to deliver the message of how the England team want to play and actually what is going on in the background. And it's humility. A lot of it comes down to humility. But you listen to Rassi and Sia in that interview specifically where they said that the performance wasn't good enough. And maybe they're given grace because they're back-to-back world champions, so they're allowed that. But the way in which Rassi speaks about his team, he's the boss, and there's an expectation in South Africa that when you play for South Africa, you win. And that's what it is. It's not about getting better week on week. That comes as a given every time that you play rugby or every training session. But that's what it is. That's the only message that you hear. We're getting better every training session. We're getting better week on week. That's what it is. And I imagine as an England fan, it becomes tiresome, Goody.
Yeah, it does. It does. And like you said, the honesty piece, where like Steve would have come out last week and said, listen, I shouldn't have made the changes I made. I shouldn't have taken Marcus Smith off after 65 minutes against the All Blacks. People would go, fair play. Let's not do it again then. But then he backs it up this week and goes, I'm not going to take him off, but I'm just going to move him to fullback. And we put George Ford on. The honesty piece is huge. And when Jim talks about charisma, it's actually fronting up to your own errors as well. And it is a bit easier for Razzie and South Africa to say those things when you've won and played badly. But, Jamie George in his interview said he's really proud of our defence. Well, you've also then said, well, it's not acceptable to ship 42 points. So, like, what is the message? And so, if he'd have said something along the lines of, yeah, we're working on this blitz, we ain't got it right, but we need to temper it and sometimes blitz and sometimes not, you'd have a better feeling. But then actually sometimes as a head coach and a captain, you don't need to or want to tell the world everything. So you just run these lines that you just sort of spit out there are like, yeah, we're going to get better. And it is difficult for Jamie George, especially emotionally after a game as captain. But when Steve speaks, there is a huge lack of charisma.
I think as an Englishman coach in England, it gives you a license, I feel, and as an English coach having played for England as well, it gives you that license to be able to show more honesty and say, you know what, fucking hell, let's cut the shit. Weren't good enough. Like, we should beat Australia. Forget the Lions being slightly out of sync. We're going to put pressure on ourselves that when we come to HQ, as they always call it, we're going to fucking deliver. And if it ain't good enough, we're going to make big decisions because this is England. As in that kind of almost charismatic arrogance, which England in years gone by with the likes of Martin Johnson, where he was running the show. Yes, you had Clive at the helm, and I hate to go back to that generation, but you had Lawrence Delally, you had these characters who were just fucking honest, loose, but honest men. And I think that is kind of what they're lacking. I think like fundamentally there's a Northern Hemisphere aspect to that as well, with this kind of, I'm not going to say it's broken humility, but it's almost like this false humility of being able to say, like Ireland, it's just another game. That's not just another game, right? The All Blacks fucking did you over in the quarterfinal. It's redemption. This is what it's about. And maybe it's me, maybe it's kind of like the glitz and the glamour. It's easier said than done, but I think that from an outsider looking in, I think the England fans, I think rugby needs a different approach to delivery after matches like that.
Pod.
Rugby pod.